The night my best friend put a gun to my head, I realized betrayal doesn't kill you. It buries you alive. And when you're buried, you have two choices: lie still under the dirt, or claw your way out until your enemies choke on the dust you rise from. My name is Mateo Alvarez, and once I was a king in my own small kingdom. A man with a crown made of asphalt and smoke. I ran trucks, warehouses, logistics routes across the city. If something moved, it moved because of me. They called me El Rey del Asfalto, the king of asphalt. I didn't give myself that name, but I wore it because my people gave it. Workers, drivers, men who knew I paid fair and looked out for them. But kings don't rule alone. And every king has a right hand. Mine was Gabriel. We weren't brothers by blood, but we may as well have been. Same block, same hunger, same fights in alleyways when we were kids. We made promises in cheap whiskey bars, always us, always loyalty, blood before paper. For years, I believed him. I trusted him with my company, my life. That trust is what killed me. It was supposed to be the biggest deal of our lives. A contract with the Port Authority, millions on the line. Enough to put us beyond reach, enough to make our names permanent in the city's bones. The night before the signing, Gabriel called me. He said we needed to go over numbers in private, away from the noise. I went without hesitation. The warehouse was dark, silent except for the echo of my boots. I thought I heard his voice deeper inside. I stepped forward, and felt cold steel press against the back of my head. "Don't take it personal," he whispered. "There's only room for one king." The blow came quick. Fists, boots, pain exploding through my ribs. I don't know how long it lasted. Long enough for the blood to fill my mouth. Long enough for me to realize the gun wasn't there to threaten me, it was there to crown him. They dumped me in the desert outside the city. Broken ribs, shattered pride, the dirt swallowing me whole. Days passed in blurs of heat and thirst until I crawled into a gas station bathroom, half dead. By the time I stood again, Gabriel had erased me. Papers forged, accounts emptied, contracts signed under his name. And the story he spread? That I had stolen from him. That I had fled. That I was the traitor. Overnight, I went from king to ghost. I disappeared. Took work under false names, loading docks, driving trucks for men who used to call me boss. Nobody looked at me twice. I kept my head down, lived small, drank bitterness like water. And all the while, Gabriel's face grinned at me from newspapers, from TV screens, shaking hands with mayors, kissing babies for cameras. My company wore his banners. My warehouses stood with his name. Every time I saw his smile, I felt the desert again. The dirt in my teeth. His whisper in my ear. Only one king. For a while, I thought maybe I'd die like that. A ghost walking among men. But ghosts see everything. And I saw cracks forming in his empire. Workers whispering that he was greedy. Contracts signed with bribes, not sweat. Deals made on lies. The first man to find me was Diego, one of my oldest welders. He caught me outside a diner one night, lifted my chin with his scarred hands and said, "If you rise, we rise with you." I laughed, bitter. Rise with what? I've got nothing. But Diego shook his head. You've got memory. You've got us. And he wasn't alone. Slowly, men came back to me. Old workers, young ones sick of Gabriel's cruelty. They slipped me tools, food, loyalty. We met in abandoned lots on weekends, clearing brush, fixing fences. At first it was nothing, a garden here, a shelter there. But people noticed. They whispered, "El Rey lives." Victor noticed too. His response was lawyers. Letters threatening to shut us down. Inspectors suddenly crawling over our projects. And when that didn't work, thugs with baseball bats. But my men stood firm. They'd already lost everything to him, they had nothing left to fear. Then came the night an old woman came to me, bent with time, clutching deeds yellow with age. She pressed them into my hands. Your father promised me protection. Gabriel raised my rent instead. Take these. Do what he never did. Inside were land titles still under old names. Leverage. A weapon? With those papers, I sold what I could, built with what I couldn't. A block of housing for workers. A cooperative farm on unused land. Each project another strike against his empire. Journalists came, writing stories of the betrayed king rebuilding from dust. Gabriel raged, called me a thief, a liar. But every word drew more eyes to me. And then I found his true weakness, the ledgers. Hidden by workers who despised him, the books showed years of fraud, extortion, bribes. Proof his empire was built not just on my ruin, but on rot. I bided my time, patient. Because revenge doesn't come from rage. Rage makes you sloppy. Revenge comes from patience. And when the moment came, I waited until the city council meeting, the one where Gabriel was set to unveil his shining new tower. I walked in, folder in hand, dirt still on my boots. When my turn came, I laid the ledgers on the table. My voice was steady. This is the truth. Every forged signature. Every bribe. Every stolen acre. Gasps filled the chamber. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled. Gabriel shot to his feet, face pale. This is slander. No, I said. This is soil. And soil doesn't lie. The room erupted. That night he called me, voice shaking with fury. You think you're a hero? No, I told him. I'm the dirt under your nails. And dirt never forgets. The investigation tore through him like fire. Fraud charges. Tax evasion. Investors fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. Gabriel, once untouchable, dragged into court in handcuffs. His smirk gone. Workers cheered for me, but I didn't cheer. Because revenge isn't sweet. It tastes like iron. Still, I stood taller. For the first time since the desert, I felt alive again. And when Gabriel hissed at me across the courtroom, "You'll never forgive me," I met his eyes and said, "You're right. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. But I survived. And that's enough." He fell. His empire burned. And I rebuilt. Not a kingdom, not a crown. Something smaller. Something honest. Housing for workers. Schools for their children. Not a king. Not a ghost. A man. And sometimes, that's stronger than any crown. Because Gabriel had been right about one thing, there's only room for one king. But what he never understood was that I never wanted a throne. I only wanted my life back. And I took it. Exile became my companion. I lived small, worked jobs that paid little and demanded less of my pride. Truck stops, repair yards, construction sites where nobody cared who I was as long as I lifted what needed lifting. The nights were worse, lying awake in cheap rooms, replaying the gun pressed to my skull, the echo of Gabriel's whisper. I kept telling myself I would let it go. That maybe survival was enough. But the truth is, betrayal doesn't sit still. It gnaws. It festers. And it either kills you slowly or hardens you into something unbreakable. For me, it became steel. I began to study. Not formally, no universities for ghosts. I read manuals, law books pulled from libraries, anything about contracts, finance, logistics. I wanted to understand the language Gabriel had used to erase me. Knowledge became my weapon. And while I studied, I worked. Every paycheck went into small investments, hidden through names no one could trace. A truck here. A warehouse space there. Always quiet. Always shadows. The men found me again. Word spread faster than I wanted. Mateo is alive. At first, I denied it. But when I walked into a diner and saw 3 of my old drivers waiting at a table, hope in their eyes, I couldn't turn them away. "If you rise, we rise," they said. So I began to rise. We called ourselves nothing at first, just a crew moving goods in the night. But loyalty is louder than banners. And soon, whispers returned, El Rey del Asfalto is back. Gabriel noticed. Of course he did. The first strike was small, a contract he expected, snatched by my shadow company. Then another. Then another. He grew louder, angrier, ranting on TV about rats eating his empire. I smiled for the first time in years. Because he didn't know the rat was the ghost he thought he buried. But revenge is never clean. The past doesn't stay buried neatly. That's when Camilla returned. She had been with me once, years ago, back when Gabriel and I were still brothers. After I fell, she went to him. I told myself I didn't care. But when she walked into the warehouse where we were loading trucks one night, time froze. You're supposed to be dead, she whispered. Not dead, I said. Just waiting. She looked older, sharper, but her eyes carried shadows. She tried to warn me off. Said Gabriel was dangerous, untouchable. But I saw the way she held herself, tight, trapped. She wasn't protecting him. She was surviving him. You don't know what he's become, she said. I almost laughed. I know exactly what he is. I know it better than anyone. She stayed silent for a long time. Then she whispered, then finish it. Her words were fuel. I set the trap carefully. A fake contract, millions on the line, designed to look like a government deal too good to resist. Gabriel lunged at it, greedy as ever. He forged, bribed, twisted the numbers, and all of it led straight into the hands of investigators already watching him. When the police raided his office, cameras flashing, Gabriel laughed. He thought he'd buy his way out. He always had. Until they laid out the evidence. Until he saw my handwriting across the paperwork, my fingerprints all over the bait. And until he saw me standing outside, watching. The look on his face, shock, rage, disbelief, was the crown I had been waiting for. The trial was chaos. Reporters called it the fall of the Golden King. Gabriel raged in court, calling me a traitor, a liar, screaming that I was supposed to be dead. I sat calm, hands folded, every word he spat only confirming the truth. When he was convicted, fraud, embezzlement, extortion, the city roared. Some cheered for me. Some cursed us both. But in the end, it didn't matter. Because Gabriel's empire burned. And in the ashes, I rebuilt. Not a kingdom. Something better. Housing for workers who had been cheated. Schools for their children. Projects that didn't make me rich, but made me whole. For the first time since that night in the warehouse, I felt the dirt leave my mouth. I felt like a man again. But there was still one final reckoning to come. The trial stretched for weeks, a theater where Gabriel played the victim and I sat silent, letting evidence speak. Every day the cameras were there, snapping his fury, catching my calm. I didn't need to shout. The truth was louder than anything he could scream. The city called it the fall of the Golden King. To me, it was something simpler, the burial of a man who thought betrayal could be a foundation. Gabriel glared at me across the courtroom. His eyes, once warm with brotherhood, now burned with hatred. You think you've won? He hissed one morning as guards pulled him past me. I leaned close, my voice steady. I didn't win. I survived. And that's something you'll never do. His trial ended with a conviction on every count: fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. He was sentenced to decades behind bars. No golden suit, no silver tongue could save him now. But victory didn't feel like fire. It felt like ash. Because revenge doesn't make you whole. It doesn't heal the scar of betrayal. It only proves you're still standing. Still, standing was enough. After Gabriel fell, I poured everything into rebuilding. Not empires, not crowns, something smaller, stronger, honest. We turned empty lots into housing for workers. Warehouses became schools for their children. The same streets where I once bled became places of shelter, of dignity. The people who had once called me king now called me something better, a man they could trust again. Camilla came to see me one night. She stood in the doorway of the cooperative farm, the sunset painting her in gold. "You did it," she said softly. "No," I said. "We did." Her eyes carried regret, sorrow for the years she'd stood at Gabriel's side. I didn't blame her. Betrayal is contagious, it spreads like fire, forces people into corners. I didn't take her back, but I didn't turn her away either. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's moving forward. The men who had once carried me from the desert now walked beside me as partners. Diego, scarred hands blackened from years of work, smiled as he watched children play in a courtyard we'd built together. "This," he said, "is the crown." And maybe he was right. Because crowns aren't gold or jewels. They're weight. Responsibility. The trust of people who believe in you. Gabriel's crown had been made of smoke, and it burned in his hands. Mine was made of dust and sweat. And it held. Years later, I returned to the desert where he'd left me to die. I stood under the same sun, the same silence pressing on my shoulders. I bent down, scooped up a handful of dirt, and let it run through my fingers. "This is where I was buried," I whispered. "And this is where I rose." The dirt blew away on the wind, carrying the ghost of the man I had been. I walked back to the city not as a king, not as a ghost, but as Mateo Alvarez, a man who had been betrayed, broken, buried, and yet still rose from ashes. And when people asked me, was it worth it? I told them this. Betrayal doesn't kill you. It buries you. But if you claw your way out, if you rise again, if you make your enemies choke on the dust you came from, that's worth more than any crown. Because Gabriel had been right about one thing, there's only room for one king. But what he never understood is that I never needed a throne. I only needed my life back. And I took it.